Welcome to this week's AutoLooks online feature. This week we're looking at the 2011 Kia Sportage. Yes, welcome back to the swamp. Into its third generation, the new Kia Sportage is looking a lot better than its predecessors. Considering the fact that its recent predecessor, the Generation 2 Sportage, really did look a lot like the Hyundai Tucson. Now, looking at the front end of this brand new Sportage, we can see that Kia has brought back their brand new H-style grille. This is a decent looking grille, but I'm not going to give it a perfect 10 out of 10. Let's just say this thing's getting an 8. The H, kind of decent, but really, they should add something more and reduce the amount of chrome. Plastic chrome always tends to fade with years. Now, up front, great features to look at. Headlights. Yes, they are very vicious looking, but they could have used a little bit of tweaking. I'm going to give them a 9 out of 10. They're almost perfect. Now, you're looking on the bottom, you can see the fact that they do have a happy face style rear or bottom air duct. This thing is, well, let's just say, not too happy. Really, it does look like more of an evil style front happy face. Now, the fog lamps do look decent, but they could have brought this back a tiny bit. It does look well on the Kia Sorento, but the Kia Sportage, let's just say, going with the nice smooth lines this vehicle has, they could have dropped it down just a tiny bit to kind of follow more of the line, kind of bring it so it follows right along that line of that wheel well. Now, going along the side here, the wheel wells do blend in with this vehicle, but let's just say the plastic trimmer on the outside does look decent, but is still very noticeable. Now, we all do remember the Pontiac Aztek did bring out a lot of this plastic cladding, but let's just say some vehicles still look kind of decent with it. One thing that Kia could have really worked on with this vehicle are the rims. These things look like giant hippie daisies. Nothing against hippies, but hey, look at these things. They're flat, they're very plain, and well, let's just say you add a split in the one sitting on my 2002 Rio, my garage, you got the exact same thing. Now, moving more along the side, you can see really that there is, well, let's just say an oversized D-pillar on this thing, which can cause rear view visibility damage. Why do I say this? Well, let's just take a look at this thing. If you're looking from here straight back, you're not going to be able to see through that D-pillar. I have the same problem on the old 2002 Rios. Let's just say it makes it really difficult to back up a car. And when you don't have backup lights, you kind of need this. Let's move on to the rear of this vehicle. Now, taking a look at the back end of this thing. Pretty decent looking. But again, like a lot of new automobile companies, they really got to start working on their bumper. Yeah, it's blended in well, but adding these weird notches right in the back kind of makes it look like the bumper's hanging a little bit lower and that the hatch is way taller. Kind of adds to, as I call it, the fat man look. The really weird wide end. Sort of like looking at, well, almost like the back of a supermodel if she gained a whole bunch of weight. Hey, nice smooth lines. And then something big just sticks out. Big and small. Kind of like a supermodel that doesn't really have that much of a butt. But added to this, they did do a decent job with their taillights. But along with a lot of other car companies these days, they seem to be getting into that phase of adding, I don't know, let's just say reflective taillights. Yeah, they look good, but they're not really functional. The worst vehicle I ever saw with this was back in 2001 with the Lincoln MLK. No, MLT. Their full-size F-150 style pickup truck. They had a major problem with this. They took the regular F-150 taillights, went right along the seam of the box, and added this reflector part that went over onto the tailgate. Now, it did look decent, but it made the rear taillights just look massive. One good feature about this back end is the fact that these taillights are pretty evil looking. In the back end of this thing, it looks just as mean as it does up front. Now, I do love the fact that they've added a rear hatch spoiler. This is a nice feature, and a lot of car companies are starting to go with it. Kind of takes away from that old, just plain boring look where you had to add a notch to it. Just say, my 2002 Rio, it's an RXV, so it does have a spoiler in the back. But without that spoiler, it just looks like a giant bubble. Not too good. So it's good to see that this car company has finally realized that deck spoilers, pretty nice. I also see that they've gone with the shark tail back end. It's looking a lot better than some of the other car companies out there. Now, what can I say is the worst part about the rear end of this vehicle? The exhaust, sitting right here. Okay, this exhaust, consider the fact that it's not integrated into the design as the previous Sportage had. It's, well, not going to do very well over the years. Consider the fact that I have a 99 Malibu, and my exhaust isn't integrated into the design. It is now sitting about 3 inches from my rear bumper and kind of just dangling there. Makes the car look cheap and old. Well, it is kind of cheap and old because it's a basic one, but it really does make it look cheap and old. You ever see a 2001 Pontiac Grand Prix? Integrated exhaust right into it, it still looks decent to this day, even if they're falling apart. Okay, now, on an overall score of this vehicle, let's just take a look here. We're going to look at, well, its roofline. Pretty basic, pretty standard, kind of like a mini Sorrento. Stance, high up, pretty aggressive, seems like it can go off-road, but who knows? It doesn't really look like a Jeep. So you never know, you might get hung up on something. Of course, they did add a great feature here. They did add a front skid plate integrated right into the design. A lot of car companies seem to be doing this these days, and it's looking very nice. Now, plastic to metal look, we're not looking very good right here. Why do I say that? Well, that plastic trim along the wheel wells, very good for rust, considering the fact that we live up in Canada. But you gotta integrate the color right into the design. Ever look at a 2001 Chrysler 300M Limited? The black and gray or blue and gray? You can tell that gray is plastic, but it blends in with the design very well. This doesn't. You can tell it's plastic, and it looks like, well, a toy car. Now, the best thing about this vehicle is, yes, it is very sexy. Gotta say that. Out of a 10, I'm giving this thing an 8. The only reason why it gets an 8, well, the Grille still kind of needs a little bit more, let's say, Audi appeal. Look at the front end of an Audi. Even if they make the front end very bland and boring, the Grille still makes the front of the car. This one doesn't. Still kind of makes it look kind of bland, boring, and sorry to say, it still looks like a Kia. Now, cheap, luxurious, I just mentioned it right there. It still looks like a Kia. Everyone knows a Kia is in the lower end of the brands. Slow to fast, I'd say it's relatively fast compared to its competitors. Compared to a CRV, this thing's going to win hands down, 9 out of 10. And then we're looking at its natural or mysterious appeal. This thing isn't super mysterious like a UFO, something like, our the last car we did one on, the CRZ, was kind of like a UFO. Kind of odd, kind of outgoing. Had its own outline. This thing doesn't have its own outline. If you look at this, you can see a lot of mid-size SUVs. So we're going to have to give this thing a 6 out of 10. Now, overall, this vehicle, I'm giving it a thumbs up. Yes, Kia has come out of their shell. They are starting to make sporty and yet very sexy looking designs, but they still do have some things to change on this. Let's just say the number one thing Kia has to look at is their front grille, kind of make them look a little bit more upscale as opposed to a cheap hardened plastic. Reduce the amount of cheap looking plastic along the sides, and let's just say Kia, you need to update your wheels. Take a lesson from Mazda. You ever see their 5-point wheels? They're not the world's greatest, but they still look better than yours. This is Everett Yunkala signing off for this week of AutoLooks.